and welcome to episode number 130 of the LSR Podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. With me, I have Dustin Gowker. I have Adam Candy. You can follow them on the Twitter machine, and you should. It's free at Dustin Gowker, at Adam Candy, 2 E's. No Y. You can follow me if you hate yourself, at Matt Brown M2. Guys, holidays came, holidays gone. We're into 2022, but with that, I did want to do a special podcast, and this is not only for the listeners, but for me as well. I want to know what you guys thought were the biggest stories of 2021, which is what we're going to do here after we get past a couple of news items. And for everybody listening or anybody watching on the YouTubes, I don't know what they're going to come with here. I'm going to be as surprised as you guys are. I do not know. I did not get this in advance. And so whatever they deem to be the biggest story, but they're individually, I don't know what it's going to be. So, yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting for all of us as we get going here. But, Dustin, let's start things off and talk a little bit of Ohio before we get into the countdown.
Yeah, since the last time we all congregated and talked about the sports betting industry, Ohio officially joined the states that have legal sports betting coming. The governor, Mike DeWine, signed it into law just before Christmas, paving the way for sports betting to go live sometime in 2022. Now, that you might be excited about that. Maybe Super Bowl, maybe March Madness. Nope, neither of those is going to happen. You're looking at definitely not even looking at the start of the NFL season. I think from what we're hearing, it's going to be, in a best case scenario, very late next year. But this is going to be a wide open market with lots of retail sports books, lots of online sports books, and should be pretty good for you, the bettor, if you're listening in Ohio and you want to bet. So you just have to wait a little bit, but it is official. They're working on they're going to be working on regulations in the not too distant future. But we're going to be looking. That's going to be the big story of 22 is when does Ohio launch? This is one of the larger states to legalize sports betting, or will be in 2022. So it'll be interesting to follow next year or this year. Sorry.
I know. It's like we're here. It's here. I can't even believe it. Adam, look, this is one of those things we've talked about multiple times here on the pod for a couple of different reasons. One, because all the neighboring states were already legalized and people from Ohio were crossing borders and making bets and things like that. But also we're talking about this because this is one of the most sports-crazed states that are out there if you look at it not only from a professional level but all the way to a collegiate level. I mean, there are more D1 not fact. There are more D1 colleges in Ohio than there are in any other state in the country. Not fact. But it feels like that if you're ever watching football on a Thursday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday when something pops up. Odds are you're looking at a school that's in Ohio. That is that is like happens about 95% of the time. And then also, of course, sports teams across every single one of the major sports.
I, too, am excited when I see Bowling Green and Akron on a Maction Tuesday getting at it.
Yeah.
And then I realize when I look at Ohio, at least up until now, that Ohio has been a state that is 100% surrounded by legal sports betting states. Every border that Ohio has legal sports betting, and now people will not have to leave the Buckeye State in order to wager legally on sports. Do you want to know how long this process took? I was married when this started. I also was in a different decade of my life. And this is when I first started covering Ohio. These statuses have changed in the time that it took for the first iteration of this bill to go through, then for us to have a total turnover of those who were sponsoring the bill during the last election, and for someone new to pick it up, then for the Senate to pass it, then for the House to sit on it, and sit on it, and sit on it, and finally for us to get something done in terms of Ohio. So I feel like in some ways, even though I did not have maybe Ahab's desire, it is a white whale that I have acquired here.
I am certainly excited to see these numbers when they do come out, because this is just a state that has been funneling money outside for the last, however long all of the states around have been legalized. And on top of that, like we said, I mean, this is just a state that is full of collegiate teams, full of pro teams, every single major sport. It is going to be some really eye-popping numbers. There's no doubt about that. So, Adam, talk about another story that we've been talking about for about what feels like 7 years now. Let's talk about New York.
If we take it back to the DFS days that you guys know and love so well, then we clearly have been talking about this for 7 years. So here we go. New York sports betting, according to everything we hear, will go mobile at the earliest this weekend. By the latest, by the middle of next week, we'll see mobile sports betting in New York. Now, for the recap, there should be up to 9 brands that are available. And one of the things that we've heard consistently is that it will be a uniform launch date for everyone. So it won't be getting DraftKings day 1, MGM day 2, et cetera, et cetera. You should have all of the available options right from the jump. Now, the interesting part about this is that it's going to be kind of a test case for a year or two. And the senators and representatives most involved in this, Addabbo and Pretlow, have both made clear that the 51% tax rate that has been approved by state regulators is something that could be revisited before too long. And this is one of those things where we're going to kind of get a test of this market versus New Jersey versus Connecticut. And it might take a little while for things to sort of settle down in the wash to figure out, okay, how much of New Jersey really was coming from New York? How enticing can the operators make New York offers to try to bring people in from New Jersey to get that information? And keep in mind, there are a lot of wealthy New York workers who live in southern Connecticut as well. That's another factor, considering we just had legalization in Connecticut, and we have 3 sports books available there, 2 of whom have a major presence in New Jersey. So it'll be really interesting to see how this all comes together, but I'm just glad that we're talking about New York actually for real, legitimately happening at the latest next week.
Dustin, look, the operators that operate in Jersey and in New York, I mean, they know where the people live, right? I mean, they know where people's home addresses are, and so they're going to be able to know fairly quickly whether those guys are still taking their business across the border or whether they're staying in New York and creating new accounts and doing everything within the borders there in New York City. So I imagine, as Adam just said, I mean, listen, if it's open to be renegotiated, if it's open for discussion, you got to imagine that, the guys that operate in both states are going to have some pretty compelling evidence to say, like, hey, guys, they're still taking it because we can't do what we can do here. So we need to make it where we can do here what we're able to do there.
Yeah, that's an interesting part of this dynamic. I'm sure we've thrown this number out multiple times in this podcast, and it's bandied about. At least FanDuel and at least other operators too. Up to a quarter of customers in New Jersey betting on sports online are from New York or from New York City and the surrounding area. That's a huge number. So that's, you're going to see possibly New Jersey drop a little because those people no longer have to go to New Jersey to bet. They'll be staying in New York. That should be a boon to New York right off the bat, is that these people are betting in New York. That's going to be taxable revenue in New York from that standpoint. So yeah, New York there's all sorts of things in play here. You have Connecticut too, DraftKings and FanDuel in Connecticut as well. There's a lot of people who live in Connecticut bet in New York. I'd always want to have this transition of like, oh, I'm moving through these areas, and that's where we're hopefully getting to someday. Is that you're just like, oh, I'm just betting on the app and not have to worry about where I am when I'm placing that bet. We're still pretty far away from that being a reality. Even on my flight east recently from Colorado to New Jersey, there was a change in how you will use it. I'd use Colorado version of the software. It didn't automatically move my money over there. But yeah, whoever can do that the best is probably going to do well in New York and in New Jersey.
Adam, the one other thing that we haven't brought up is maybe some of the reverse, where there's some of these New Jersey people who want to head over to New York and bet because they just can't. They haven't been able to bet on Rutgers, and they just got to get over there to be able to bet on Rutgers and all of these New Jersey colleges. So I mean, maybe there's be some traffic heading the other direction.
Somehow I think the drive will be slightly easier doing that than it will be for New Yorkers still going to New Jersey.
It is pretty funny that you still can't bet on Rutgers in New Jersey.
That they tried, that this went to the ballot, and they said, no, we don't want more options.
I know. It's just, it's crazy. All right, guys, this is why we really wanted to get this podcast done here today, because it was 2021 was as wacky as it was for the entire world. It was even, it translated right over into the gaming industry as well. There was some wacky stuff that went on, some huge deals, huge news. And I was actually genuinely interested to see what these guys thought were their biggest three stories of 2021. Guys, the first two can be in no particular order. I would like you to save whatever you thought was the biggest story of 2021 for the last here. As we get going here, we'll kind of cap things off with Dustin's biggest and Adam's biggest of 2021. But Dustin, kick us off here with one of yours as far as the biggest happenings in 2021.
I went with one of the things I did was not really a particular story, but a kind of a narrative over the course of 2022. And we went into the year, or 2021, went into the year thinking about this. What is the battle for number 3, and can somebody get into number 2? That has been absolutely fascinating to watch for me. And it's still FanDuel and DraftKings 1 and 2. I see you can make a case for MGM being number 2. We don't have perfect insight into what everybody does, but MGM is getting there and really improved just based on the strength of their willingness to spend infinity money to acquire sports betting customers and to market the product. So that's and then we saw Barstool, which is a viable number 3 in some markets, but didn't really go anywhere. They launched at the end of 2020 in Pennsylvania, and then and promised us they'd be quickly number 1 everywhere they went. That has not happened. They've definitely they're number 4, number 3 in every market they've launched, even when they had no disadvantage. Even Michigan, where they launched at the same time as everyone else, basically number 3 in that market for sports betting. So, and then you have Caesars, which came on late. The merger with Caesars and William Hill, that finally went through. Rebranded all the William Hill app / everything that was going on to the Caesars brand, and then we saw Caesars just do this huge ad blitz in the second half of the year, and really trying to up its game. So this is both this is an interesting story because FanDuel and DraftKings really kind of retained what they had. That's not a God-given right, but we've set the stage for basically a 5-way battle for who's going to be the top dog in the U.S. right now in 2022 and beyond, and that was. Again, not a single story, but kind of the narrative of the year, and it was really interesting to follow.
Yeah, and basically a story because we follow numbers every single. We follow the numbers that come out of the states every single month, and we kind of dissect those and try to figure out who in the collective is kind of that legitimate number 3. Is there a chance for them to move to number 2, whatever it might be. So absolutely a story there, Adam. Just to talk a little bit more about this from your perspective on this. I mean, look, is there somebody that you think, and let's take out the guys that we know are going to be in play. We know MGM, we know DraftKings, we know FanDuel. Is there somebody outside of that top 3, and maybe it is Barstool, that you think in 2022 it could possibly make a big push as we, move forward here throughout the course of the year?
I like the way you handled this because this was probably my number 4 story that I now get to bring in here as a response to Dustin's first story. And the answer is 365. If Bet365 really goes through with what we hear, and we've heard this probably with a little bit more force than we have in past years, with its plans to get into multiple states this year, we've heard as many as 10 for 365 in 2022. I know it's not a name that has the kind of cachet with American bettors that it does with European and UK bettors, but you need to understand, if you don't, the heft, the power, the reach, the product of a 365 if they decide to really get into the United States. I understand that a lot of market share is spoken for with the companies that we've talked about, with DraftKings, with FanDuel, MGM, Caesars, Barstool. That being said, this is a company with both the pockets and the product to change the game, and to not just be number 3, to be higher than number 3 if they really do it right. And it's been very interesting. The folks we talked to say, look, this is the playbook. Like, they were never really going to get in the early gold rush days of the first 3 years that we've seen as sort of the silly season of U.S. sports betting. And so if 365 really figures that this is the time to do it, they are by far my clear number 1 for who could shake up the market.
And Dustin, I think to kind of close this one out, one of the things I was thinking about with this in kind of if we're looking long game here, is if you are kind of sitting on the sidelines right now, maybe you have the opportunity that if you are waiting a few years, a couple of years, whatever it is, to enter some of these different markets, that by not entering when everyone else entered, and then you come in and then you kind of do your blitz. I mean, listen, there's a reason people lease cars, and there's a reason why when the new TVs come out, you want the new TV and you want whatever. It's like, so maybe you can be kind of the new kid on the block, and it's like you're the shiny new toy, and people are dangling the keys, and you're like, oh yeah, let me try that, or so I understand a lot of guys are sticky. I understand a lot of bettors are sticky, but I also think that there are some that would be like, you know what? Maybe I will give these guys a try. They're new. I just saw they're running this cool new promo. I've never heard of them before or whatever. I mean, so I think there's maybe at least some of that could happen maybe over the next couple of years as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Somebody's going to try that, and 365 might be the one. They've long been lying in wait, right, for this moment, for when they thought, oh, maybe we can come in and do something, because they did not want to just spend with everyone else and just throw away money. They could do that if they really wanted to. They have plenty of money. There's no doubt about that. But it's definitely interesting to see how that shakes out. I'd be fascinated to see who does this. And the only thing going against it is that we know there's this land rush everywhere. Like, right, we see huge numbers, huge amount of signups, huge numbers being. Arizona was the big example, right? We saw just the biggest market launch ever because of when they launched and how many operators it had. And there's this land rush right away to acquire customers. So, how many of those customers are interested in another book if they come along and do a huge marketing spend 3-4 years later? I don't know. We'll find that out. People have said, this is a long game, but if you acquire the customers now, you paid a premium for them, how many more customers are there that you can get when there's this just all this interest at launch, when everybody has things opened up? You're then acquiring, you're on the fringes, or just acquiring, there's a constant churn of people turning 21 every year, obviously, and betting on sports. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out and if it's a winning strategy long term.
Yeah, and to add to that, Dustin, I think that's why it'll be really interesting to see which states 365 picks if they do it, because it would seem to me that going into mildly mature states they have a New Jersey presence, but if you make more of Pennsylvania, if you make more of Michigan, if you can take advantage of the fact that the attack surface for DraftKings and FanDuel is damn near all 50 states right now, and they're trying to spread all that VC money all over the place and go in with a target and basically say, hey, we've got enough money to come after your good customers, right? We've got enough money to come in with a good offer in certain states where maybe you're trying to play defense more than go and play land grab. I know that's probably a story for realistically 2-3 years from now on a national level, but if a company like that, a sleeping giant, wants to come in and put that kind of pressure on the national leaders in these markets where they've already done the land grab, that'll be really interesting.
And we haven't, and we didn't even. This has turned into a very large story, but yeah, I mean, and maybe this overlaps with other things, but like ESPN is out there too. Like,
stop talking.
Sorry, Adam, let's go to your. I was going
to say, let's go to Russian roulette, because Adam and I didn't compare notes.
But that's why I stopped you right where I did. That's why I stopped you right where I did.
Adam, let's go to your first one to talk about here.
It is the entry of ESPN into the market. It is ESPN changing from clearly saying, okay, we're not going to do sports betting directly, to then shifting to saying, well, maybe we'll license out the brand, to now having shifted all the way over to, well, maybe we will run a sports book. Mm-hmm. And Disney has been progressive on this from where it was, maybe not at the speed that some other operators or large media companies have been. They're taking a little more measured approach because of obviously the size and scale of the Disney company, and what is the ethical position of the Walt Disney Company at large. But they've done the research now, right? The Disney executives have come out and said, we think we can do ESPN Sportsbook without harming the Disney brand. And as much as we talk about, I talked about 365 coming into the market, if someone is going to come in and, from the American perspective, change the game, it's quite clearly the House of Mouse, right? They are the ones who have the built-in customer base and the enormous reach with every demographic, right? I mean, every single demographic knows ESPN better than it knows any one of these companies in particular. So ESPN signaling that it wants in is obviously one of the huge stories of 2021, and it's going to be one of the huge stories of 2022, 2023, and however long it takes for them to get in.
No one cares about my three. I was just going to rattle them off at the end because, again, I'm not important, but I would like to ESPN is written down as one of my 3 of the year.
That'll be great
well.
for our audio listeners. Yeah.
Yes. ESPN. I said is written down. I said ESPN is written down as one of my 3 as well. Dustin, did this kind of like blend over into one of yours as well?
Yeah, I mean, this is all. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna do a larger like M&A again. I'm looking at as much trends and try to get as much into one storyline as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. If ESPN, I mean, yeah, I mean they're obviously late to the game. I suspect they buy something in the not too distant future, because if they're trying to build something from scratch right now, that would be silly. Although, as we know, the prices of things are pretty ridiculous right now. If ESPN is going to acquire its own thing, or they've thrown gaudy numbers out there just to license their name. I don't think that makes a ton of sense for anyone to just pay $1 bazillion to say, oh, we're ESPN Sportsbook.
Yeah. Right.
You're paying so much for other things. You're just paying for the name and maybe the database, I guess. But it's there's a lot there. But yes, ESPN, a large trend of people who are not necessarily in the sports betting before, getting into it, and this media and all of that. It's all kind of wrapped into one for me, and turns into this larger, like, where are we headed? Because again, you look at the media and sports betting, it's all over the place now. That was not even the case maybe this time last year. I mean, you could see a lot of commercials, but like betting is in everything now. I mean, you even see like a Wynn doing Wynn, which is not in that many states and is not that big of a player, doing national NFL ad buys, right? That's kind of wild. Just how quickly this has become. Okay, there's enough states to constantly make national advertising worth it now. Like, or just so you're doing the branding. Tipico did the giant deal with USA Today Gannett, $50 million a year, right? I think, and that's the cost of building a brand. Like, nobody knows what a Tipico is still in the United States, I'm pretty sure. Like, but it's they think they need to spend that to get the name recognition and to get a little bit of juice out of it. So for me, it was a larger overarching story of all this of its interest and how pervasive it's become in the media.
And Adam, to kind of keep going here, and the reason it made mine as well was just the fact that, I mean, if you really look down the list right now, I mean, ESPN just owns all of sports, right? I mean, they own the entire bowl season, they own the SEC, they own NBA, they own Monday Night Football, they've got baseball if they think that's they just signed the deal to where they're going to be the golf people now. I mean, like,
they own the NHL.
I mean, they own and they own the NHL. I mean, they own sports. I mean, across all sports, and so literally you are hitting. For free, if you did launch your own book, for free, you are hitting every type of sport, every single NHL fans, golf fans, basketball fans, baseball fans, football, college football fans. I mean, like, they own the whole sporting landscape. And so you're getting to market to all of these people for free. You're hitting every single type of potential bettor.
You are, and I think the interesting part for ESPN will be what effect, if any, that has on their plans to continue as a broadcast provider, right? We've heard a lot of stories this year about how long will ESPN continue to engage in battles over carriage fees with DirecTV, with cable operators, Dish, et cetera, because of the fact that it's getting more and more exorbitant, and the broadcast providers aren't always willing to pay the same amounts. However, the reach for sports betting changes significantly if ESPN goes to a more over-the-top model, as a more broad-based product. So I think that's something else that will be a big thing to watch over the next few years.
Yeah, super interested to see what the ESPN Plus numbers for golf are going to be this year as well, because everybody's been screaming from a mountaintop, we want more coverage of golf. We don't want to tune in and half the guys have already finished for the day, and like we don't, all this stuff. And they're going to 35 different tournaments this year that they're going to go wire to wire, on ESPN Plus with. And so I'm pretty interested to see how that goes as well. I know they will be too. Adam, what's your second?
So this is going to be using one Newspeg story as a placeholder for a larger trend. And it might not be the first story you think of as the way this year went down, but the Wynn SPAC falling through is the sort of story that I think probably people should pay more attention to than they have. Wynn pulling out of its SPAC deal and basically saying, this is all too much right now. The cost to acquire customers is too much right now. The cash burn is too much right now. It goes to the whole idea of, is there going to be a second wave at some point in U.S. sports betting? And we know, just as a historical, canon, yes, of course. Look at other markets. There's going to be a second. And I think when you see someone as large as Wynn, where Dustin just mentioned, they're one of those, they're not part of the tri-exclusive partnership with the NFL, but they are one of the sort of secondary partners of the NFL, and they're out there doing a major ad buy with Ben Affleck, I guess. And so you look at what's happening there where they're pulling back, and you have to look at that as a canary in a coal mine of how long is it before we start to see those who are not cracking that top 5 that we talked about earlier begin to sort of taper off a little bit before we see more M&A the way Dustin talked about before. And we saw a little bit of it, right? We saw the Score selling to Penn National, and the Score is not a company that was built to sell like some others. Now, we always looked at it as a likely acquisition target because of the fact that it really wasn't getting a lot of traction in the U.S. To betting customers the same way it is to its media app. But I do think that when we look at the overall 2021 story and say, my God, how much money was spent in 2021 to try to acquire customers and to establish brands, that there at least was one major name in gaming that just looked at the whole thing and said, nah, I'll wait, I'm good.
Before you guys get to your number one stories and your biggest stories of 2021, my quick other two, New York Mobile is on my list as well, because it's the thing that we have been literally sitting here for multiple years now just going, hey, when is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? How are they not letting this happen? Oh, here's this iteration of a bill. Here's this iteration. This person said this person said that. Go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And to finally see at least the preliminary version, the V1 of this finally going live here early 2022 was certainly kind of a 2021 story for me. And then the other one, I kind of cheated here, but mainly it was because I wanted to rant on this just a tad. But getting those Arizona numbers coming out of the first 2 months of the Arizona launch, it does make me wonder. And Adam, this is something you and I have preached on this podcast many a time. But I can guarantee you all that money ain't Arizona money, man. There were people making that drive. There were people that were crossing the border, taking advantage of those bonuses, taking advantage of the extended markets. I actually talked to a few different people over the course of the past few weeks who said, dude, you hadn't been doing that? They're like, dude, I've been doing that. I was like, oh, well, it's certainly something that I've got to. Is seeing these numbers finally going to try and make somebody stand up and demand change in the state of Nevada, because it's already lost being the sports betting capital of the world, and it's about to be 5th, 6th, 7th before it's all said and done if they don't go ahead and get rid of some of these archaic things that they're doing right now. So I just wonder if seeing these numbers come out of Arizona, if that doesn't make somebody go, oh man, that's right on the doorstep. I mean, that is literally next door. We better do something before we fall way behind. We're already behind, but before we fall way behind.
In short, I don't think so. But I'll kind of tease ahead to a story that's going to be on Legal Sports Report this week and say that we thought that the William Hill acquisition by Caesars might be one of the tipping points that got Nevada into this century, at least into this decade, when it came to mobile registration, and then mobile registration leading to national brands being willing to come in, and then national brands being willing to come in, leading to a real fight for customers when it comes to promotional spend. That is not necessarily the case. There is still some legacy thinking from William Hill going on inside Caesars now, which is a shift for Caesars, because Caesars was one of the companies that was pushing for mobile registration. I'm not sure Caesars is going to be as prominent in that push based on what I've heard over the last month or so. It remains to be seen. Now, Station sort of pivoting a little bit to a different platform and trying to build its brand. They've always been the other group opposing mobile registration, which is the first domino that has to fall in Nevada. I haven't heard any significant change from that group, although some of our reporting suggests that maybe the ice is cracking a little bit when it comes to Station. So keep an eye on Legal Sports Report for some follow-up thoughts on where Nevada might head in 2022. And
here's the crazy part about Nevada. We just had the numbers come out, $1 billion wagered in the state in November, right? And this is with all of the headwinds for sports betting in Nevada. If you took that off, Imagine.
I know.
It would. I mean, it would honestly be number one by $1 billion, not $1 billion,
Yeah.
a lot of money again.
Yes.
And you constantly have people coming in, signing up for apps fairly easily, and in addition to the large in-person bets that you already know are placed everywhere. So Nevada could still get there, and they're still growing. They're still getting bigger even with all these headwinds. I agree. I mean, obviously, it would just be bigger if you got rid of this. And we even see all this in Illinois. Tons of money being wagered in Illinois, but despite all the nonsense that's gone on there with the in-person registration, which should be turned off here early in 2022. So, yeah, Nevada has a chance for sure to still be the number one sports betting destination, even without a huge population.
And it's not a zero-sum game. Keep that in mind. Like, some of this shift is happening already. I talked to one sportsbook operator about 2 weeks ago from one of the larger names in Nevada who said they are now taking 80% of their bets on mobile. And if you don't know the history of Nevada, that is a huge number for this state that has traditionally hovered between 55 and 60%.
Yeah, I mean for pre-PASPA, like it was like sometimes early on or a rounding error. Then it became 30-40%, right? And then right around PASPA, probably depending on the book, 40 to 50%. And now, we're getting to that point where more people get the apps and they have them, even though they're paying the apps to get them, but they have them because it's easier than going to your local sports book. So it is some just time and some easing up of restrictions, I think. Yeah.
And then Adam, to kind of close this out as well. If they don't, and this has already been malpractice in the state by not getting something done before now, but if they don't get something done by the Super Bowl, that's just what are they even doing here? I mean, that is leaving literally $100 million on the table that they could possibly have with all of the people that come in town, with all of the hoopla that goes on here, all of the craziness that goes on. I mean, this city is going to be ridiculous in 2024 for the Super Bowl. And if like Dustin just said, if it's still a pain in the ass where you have to go and you got to wait in line and then you got to have cash to fund the thing and you got to do all the stuff like that, they are leaving $100 million on the table in a week span. And it would be the biggest thing for me where I would be like, I love this city so much. I want to live here the rest of my life, all that. But it's like, do I need to move? Like, do I need to pop down and go somewhere else? Because that would be pure insanity.
Well, if you remember last year, Chris Andrews from the South Point Sportsbook was tweeting out the weekend before the Super Bowl saying, if you want a mobile account, please come sign up by Saturday because the lines are going to be so long on Sunday just to place bets that it's going to be impossible to open a mobile account. Why are we putting these artificial barriers up to make life more difficult? And I, had a conversation with him on social that's out there for anybody to see where he said, yes, we absolutely support being able to sign up from elsewhere. Now, the South Point is owned by Michael Gaughan, one of the most old school Vegas guys there is. Yeah. If Michael Gaughan, one of the old school Vegas fixtures, can see where this is going, then everybody should get on board.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, it's just to just pile on here with what Dustin's saying is like, if you could easily be the number one state yet again, because the other thing that you're doing by making all these tourists, because again, most of these tourists are not signing up for app, they're just doing over the counter stuff or whatever. That eliminates any in-game opportunities for them to continue to bet, any in-game stuff like that. So you're throwing away X% that you could be getting from an in-game perspective as well when you're only taking stuff over the counter. It's just very, very short-sighted. All right, Dustin, what is your number one story / kind of ongoing thing here from 2021?
We should let Adam go because I don't want him flip over the computer or the table.
No, this is the order we went in first. You get to have the opportunity to go first. I actually have two stories ready just in case.
All right. For me, this could just be a jumping off point into legalization in general. But Canada had its PASPA moment, basically. And it was easy to forget about that because we're all Americans. But Canada legalized single-game sports betting this past year, and that opened it up for every province in the state, kind of like the Supreme Court decision did in the United States. That's a huge moment you could only do parlays. Now, we haven't seen a whole lot of this in reality other than the lottery apps around Canada have opened up to single-game betting. We're looking for Ontario here sometime in the spring probably to open up the market to basically, what has been a gray black market, like with everybody who wants to do it, you're now going to be regulated. You're coming into Ontario. So this is, and if we didn't have New York going live, this would be it would be the single biggest entity. It's a large province that's bringing sports betting into the light. So this is a huge story, and it trails into 2022 because we haven't yet seen the launch. But Canada's been kicking around single game betting for quite a long time. And it's, it didn't actually, it finally happened. It got through. Even at the last moment, it was not clear that this was going to happen. But now open for every province to do it if they want. And Ontario is the first example of that coming to fruition.
And, this dates all the way back to my, online poker life and even the DFS life and stuff like back before that. That is a big time gaming country. And I've talked to people who live up there and they're like, hey, bro, you ever seen the winners up here? Yeah, I ain't going outside. I ain't whatever. So you find things to do. Like they would find, they found online poker and that became like a hobby that you could do indoors that you would still have fun. They found DFS. It was something that you could do indoors and still be able to have fun and sweat the games and things and whatever. And it will be the same with sports betting as well. It's a thing that they can do that doesn't require, going out in those freezing temperatures and having to bear all that stuff and whatever. And so it'll be the exact same thing with that, Adam. And so I think that definitely one of the deals, because I understand we live in our own little bubble here in America, but yes, that opening up there, it's going to do gangbusters.
No, there's no question. We have all the research, right? We know the size of Ontario. We know that it measures up with, just by itself, the top 10 states in the U.S. would rank well within there. And so, just being able to open up that market is going to be a very interesting development for sure. And we're really kind of seeing it go a little bit slower than I thought it would here at the jumping off point.
All right, Adam, take us home here. Your number one story of 2021.
Well, the honorable mention that did not make the list is going to be the crown jewels of the United States. In 2021, we saw California put multiple measures onto the ballot, or at least begin the process of putting multiple measures onto the ballot to legalize sports betting. Does that mean we're going to be betting on sports come the end of 2022 in California? No, it's still going to be a very long process with a lot of lawsuits and pain before there's any sort of significant legal sports betting in California. We saw Florida start and then stop. That is another thing that requires a major story marker, I guess, as we do stories of 2021, because that opened up larger questions about the validity of mobile tribal gaming. And that probably could be its own story all by itself. And then we saw Texas begin the process as well, with some team partnerships popping up. That legislature only meets every 2 years, and so we can't do anything about that till 2023. But we see those big states, which are the ones we've been watching for all along, all have significant movement on some level. But for me, the overall story of 2021 is the TV ad blitz and the cultural acceptance of sports betting. If you did not know that there were legal sportsbook apps in the United States prior to 2021, you have been living under a very large boulder if you don't know at the end of 2021 that this exists. And a lot of it owes to the partnerships signed by the NFL that have led to DraftKings, FanDuel, Caesars, etc., BetMGM, all having these major ad blitzes. And the fact that you cannot get away from it. And we've talked about this anecdotally, right? We've talked about the idea that, yes, it's integrated into every broadcast. It's integrated into every fantasy platform. It's integrated into over the top. It's integrated into the media apps that you use. And we are burning, obviously, billions of dollars of cash on TV ads trying to get people to come bet on sports legally. Now, is that good or not? And I think that we could really dive into this in a number of different ways. And that's part of why, for me, it's the biggest story of the year. Is it good because it reminds some people of the 2015 DFS ads blitz? No, obviously not, because you don't want to draw the eyes of the less educated regulators to this and say, what's going on? I'm hearing from everybody that they're tired of these ads. Well, no, that's obviously not a good thing. However, in the overall picture of, do you want to get people away from bookies and offshore? Of course you need that awareness and cultural acceptance of what legal sports betting looks like in the United States, and that there are I'm not going to call them all convenient options because we still have the Wire Act to deal with, and the fact that Dustin just talked about, you can't bet interstate, you have to use different apps, etc. Yes, I think that those are things that could change to make this better. You could also put into 2021, if you wanted to, the fact that we have a new presidency that poses less of an existential threat to the Wire Act ruling on online gaming and sports betting. But I think it all goes to a cultural shift and a cultural acceptance of betting on sports that is in its infancy right now. We don't know what it's going to grow into, but we do know that we saw this gigantic blitz of television and radio advertising over the last 12 months, and we have not seen a significant backlash to it. We have not seen anyone in any sort of uniform opposition standing up and saying, we need to stop this. This shouldn't be happening. And I think that is a very promising sign for the future of the legal industry.
And Dustin, this is something, and it is a great story here for 2021. It's something that we touched on a podcast, I think, 3 or 4 months ago, is the fact that, listen, I'm going to full on hats off to these operators because I think they learned a lot from the DFS stuff and they realized like early on what not to do in all of this. And like, look, Caesar's just taking the approach of trying to be funny, right? And then you've got like some taking the approach of, okay, we'll put a couple celebrities out there and all this, but like none of this is the get rich quick stuff that we were seeing with DFS. It is not like, hey, you're going to become a millionaire. Hey, you're going to whatever, like, hey, all you're 5 bets away from a private island or, listen, there's none of that stuff that's going on here. And so it is a big tip of the cap. Yes, they're frequent, but I mean, so are McDonald's ads and Coke ads and whatever. And like, we can debate all day long whether fast food and soda is good for you and all that. And, we've just, again, acceptance as Adam's talking about. And so I think that we've just kind of accepted this as part of society now. And as long as they do it responsibly, which so far so good, I feel pretty good about where we're at from that aspect of everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely encouraging. Not that any single sportsbook didn't have missteps in last year or in previous years. Like there have been problems and things, but there's nothing that's. I thought there would be something worse by now, for sure.
You and I both.
Yeah,
yes.
We thought there would be some major scandal or just people like saying screw responsible gambling, and there'd be some story come out from the New York Times, something about how all these people were just betting money they couldn't afford at sportsbooks. Now, it doesn't mean that the stories don't exist or couldn't happen, but we've made it through basically 3 years of online sports betting, growing and becoming a bigger part of America, and there hasn't been this pushback. I've always feared that, and there's still a possibility of that happening, but. I will agree that I think operators have done a really good job of while it can be obnoxious and ubiquitous, it is not gotten to the point where you worry about it. Like they do it in the right way, I think. And I could sit here and critique commercials all day long. Most of them are indeed awful, I think. But people remember them. People remember them.
Yeah.
People then search for them when they see the commercials. It's it's serving the purpose. So I agree with Adam's take there. It's really heartening to see that we haven't had this backlash moment for sports betting in the U.S.
Adam, I think you would even say, kind of like Dustin and I just did when I just quickly agreed with him too. Like, I thought there would probably be something where we would have this gigantic bone to pick, right? Like we'd get to the end and we'd be like, okay, what the biggest story was scandal X, or that they're doing this, or this happened or something. And honestly, that hasn't been the case. And I think just moving forward, that is at least a very encouraging, very promising thing for the industry as a whole. Now, I'm sure there'll be someone come in and do something where we have to, call out the jackassery or whatever. But but I mean, look, nothing's going to be perfect. But by and large here, if we're talking from the whole, I think we've done pretty good so far.
The only scandal story that we've talked about this year is, of course, the nutball story of Play Up and Le Lamentas, which is still ongoing. And if that's the biggest scandal that we're talking about, which is way more to do with inside baseball than it is about TV advertising scandal, et cetera, then obviously something has been learned. And I think that's the point to go to, is that the lessons learned from 2015 certainly are evident. That being said, we are not out of the woods on responsible gambling concerns, and whether we start to see more stories of those who struggle with responsible gambling and have it try to be pinned back to the growth of the legal market. I'm not saying that that would necessarily be incorrect. I'm not saying it necessarily would be correct. But perception is reality when it comes to responsible gambling with the TV ad blitz that I'm talking about right now. And so I think it's important to say lessons clearly were learned to the positive side from 2015. It does not absolve anybody from what needs to probably be a stronger focus on responsible gambling moving into 2022 along the lines, even if I find the ads themselves to be a little bit cheesy, of the NFL Steve Mariucci ads where he's writing on the chalkboard and saying, have a game plan. It's still important that we are publicly and broadly acknowledging it.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's what I was going to kind of ride us out with was like, and also, a tip of the cap to the leagues as well, because they did get on early here in the responsible gaming thing. They didn't wait for people to be like, what are the leagues doing? They did go ahead and come out early and dedicate some resources and some time and some manpower to making sure that is a messaging from them as well.
Before we get out of here, I want to tack on my favorite story of 2021.
Okay.
Just an ongoing story. But the fact that there is an app in Washington, D.C. that is available everywhere in the district, and it is beat every month by the Caesars Will Hill book at the stadium where the Wizards and the Capitals play. And you can bet online there, but in this little radius. But somehow this retail sportsbook with a little bit of online beats an app that's available everywhere. It's so awful that it takes in less money, both in handle and revenue, every month. It's hilarious to me. And basically everybody's like, well, okay, great. I guess that's it. And we even saw this was after this just recently, right? Like the Gambit, the DC app said we're working on fixing our markets because the VIG on the games is something like what minus 120s, right?
Yeah.
It's something ridiculous.
That's a good line for Gambit.
For them, that's a good one.
But the product is so abysmal, and it's hilarious. I see the story or I see the numbers come from Matt Waters every month, and I'm like, this is endlessly not funny to me. And like, nobody in DC wants to change it either. Like, we have a great example of how a bad app and a monopoly is not good, staring us in the face, and we still do monopolies and all of that. I hope everybody learns from that in 2022. Nobody will, but.
As long as we finish 2021 with some Dustin anger, I feel like we've done well.
There we go. I agree as well. Guys, we really do appreciate the support here on the podcast. 130 episodes now, looking forward to continuing on and just trying to keep everybody, abreast of everything that's happening in this crazy industry. I mean, look, stuff happens behind the scenes, stuff happens when you're at work, stuff happens that you just don't even hear about. And so, Dustin, of course, the godfather of this, but Adam, and his team over there, Pat, Matt, Brad, shout out to all of those guys.
John Holden as well, deserving a shout out.
All of those guys that are on top of all this stuff all day long. Kudos to you guys and awesome job in 2021 and look forward to an awesome 2022. As we say, every one of these stories we talk about, you can find over on the website. Everything we talk about on this podcast moving forward, you can find over on the website in a big, long written form where you can take in, every single aspect of the story. For Dustin, for Adam, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.